And some dissent on the now completed Republican platform from our guest commentators, author Gore Vidal.
Is the dovish plank on Vietnam a cunning device to get peace-minded voters to vote for war-minded candidates? I happen to be suspicious because in 1964 I voted for Lyndon Johnson and peace.
And editor William F. Buckley, Jr.
The platform is an excellent example of the capacity of a platform to reconcile different points of view. On the one hand, there is something in it for most Republicans. On the other hand, a dove-minded candidate could select and stress certain phrases, as could a war-minded candidate.
We'll be back with a full report on all that happened in Miami in the 24 hours before the convention in 1 minute.
10 seconds.
The Republican platform, completed early this morning and issued today, says that the Johnson administration's Vietnam policy has failed in every respect, and the Republicans now offer what is called a positive program for settlement based on self-determination, a course that will enable the South Vietnamese to assume increasing responsibility, but the Republicans will not agree to a peace at any price or camouflage surrender. Mr. Vidal, is that an adequate statement of what has to be done about Vietnam?
Well, I think Mr. Buckley said it rather wisely at the top of the program, that this was a plank on which both a dove and a hawk could run or take off from, to complete the metaphor. And I think the two principal candidates are, of course, Richard Nixon, obviously, and as an alternative, I see Ronald Reagan. And I would like to, as a public service, if I may, very briefly go through some of the positions that each of these men, just quotations that they have made, because I'm genuinely puzzled as to what they would do about the Vietnam War, and I think most people are puzzled, and certainly the platform hasn't been much help. Now, Ronald Reagan, I have 5 statements here that he's made in the last 5 years. The first is, peaceful coexistence is dangerous folly. That's the 7th of November, 1963. Shortly thereafter, on the 15th of October, 1965, he said we should declare war on Vietnam. We could pave the whole country and put parking strips on it and still be home by Christmas. A nice metaphor. Then, in the 1st of April, 1967, he favored, quote, a step-up of the war. Shortly thereafter, on the 24th of June of 67, he said, we have the power to wind this war up fast. I think we should use it. Now this year, 25th of March, in U.S. News and World Report, Governor Reagan said maybe the enemy ought to have some unrest in some corner of his realm to worry about, which sounds a bit like adventurism. He then said in the same article, quote, this policy of accommodation asks us to accept the greatest possible immorality. So he's against coexistence with them. And then finally, just a few weeks ago, he said the war in Vietnam must be fought through to victory. We have been patient too long. And just a few days ago, he said that Lyndon Johnson was trying to fight the war too cheaply. Now, I'd like to ask Mr. Buckley, who is a friend of Ronald Reagan and has talked to him about the war, what will he do? Will he use ultimate weapons, or will he accommodate with the enemy?
Well, I think that Mr. Reagan has made it a lot more clear than, for instance, President Johnson has done, concerning whom one could very easily produce a series of statements concerning the Vietnam War, which are, to say the least, at least as confusing as these. I think Mr. Reagan has been pretty well clear that he is prepared to leave alone any country in the world which itself is prepared to leave us alone. I remember his remarking his enthusiasm for a formulation by Senator Fulbright. Senator Fulbright said in 1967 in a highly quoted speech, however, the United States may despise as obnoxious the internal doctrines of any particular nation, we have no right to attempt to control or extirpate those doctrines unless there is an effort being made to export them. And this precisely captures the spirit of Mr. Reagan's foreign policy, and for that matter my own. So that I think that what we have to worry about is whether or not during the past few years, the great hallucinations under which we have been persuaded that there is in fact a politics of convergence, whether those are dangerous hallucinations. And this is really what the Republican Party, I think, is here to talk about.
I think it's worrisome, however, a candidate who as recently as 2 months ago is talking about the dangerous folly of peaceful coexistence. One thing we have to remember, that there are more communists than there are us. We are a minority in the world, and I would think that a militant hawk who would like to embark us on other foreign adventures like Vietnam would be a very dangerous person to have. And apparently Mr. Richard Nixon is in agreement. An obscure statement of his, which is extraordinarily dovish and, to my mind, very sensible. In October of '67 in Foreign Affairs, he said, serious question whether the American public or American Congress would now support a unilateral American intervention even at the request of a host government. So apparently I would say that Nixon was going to have an extremely difficult time were people, pressures in his party, leading him into foreign adventures on the Vietnam.
Mr. Buckley?
Well, I don't think any Republican, at least none that I can think of, this is a problem that Mr. Vidal will face more intimately in Chicago. I don't think any Republican is daunted by the mere fact of numbers. There are far more communists in the world than there are Democrats, far more than there are Americans. So far as we can tell, of course, the communists don't go in pre-election, so it's difficult to stipulate the popularity of their regimes. But our force in the world is based on a leverage which is one part moral and one part technological. On these we rely very heavily.
If I may make a point there, that if we have absolutely no moral right to be in Vietnam, I'm afraid we haven't got time to go into that in great detail, but we have absolutely forgot all morality when we did not live by the Geneva Accords.
We have about 30 seconds. Can Mr. Buckley have those 30 seconds for a rebuttal?
Well, I think that there's a lot of cynicism in any platform. For instance, there's one phrase that says, nor have we forgotten the Cuban people who still cruelly suffer under communist tyranny. What that really means is, nor have we forgotten to forget the Cuban people who still suffer under communist tyranny. This is, after all, a political convention, not a convention among tablet keepers. And under the circumstances, I think they're doing pretty well.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Vidal. Mr. Buckley, I'm sorry we don't have more time, but we do have 4 more nights, and we'll make the most of them beginning tomorrow. Every night we intend to call on political editor Bill Lawrence.
U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania, Rick Santorum. And ladies and gentlemen, the Republican candidates for President of the United States. Photo spray, photo spray. And now please rise for our national anthem performed by the University of North Florida Chamber Singers. And candidates, please take your positions at the podiums while I tell you a little bit more about how this debate will work. I'll be the moderator. As I mentioned, our partners from the Republican Party of Florida and the Hispanic Leadership Network will ask questions. I'll follow up and guide the discussion. Candidates, I'll try to make sure each of you gets your fair share of questions. You'll have 1 minute to answer and 30 seconds for follow-ups and rebuttals. And I'll make sure you get time to respond if you're singled out for criticism. Now, let's have the candidates introduce themselves to Florida voters. Please keep it short. Here's an example. I'm Wolf Blitzer, and I am thrilled to be here on the campus of the University of North Florida in Jacksonville. With that, Rick Santorum, let's begin with you.
Hi, I'm Rick Santorum, and I'm here to institute a no cables in the shot policy in the White House.
I'm Newt Gingrich, and I ran a marathon before I got here.
Mitt Romney, and I'm proud to be at the University of North Florida.
Ron Paul, less government.
Very well said. Our first question coming from the red, there's no one down there. Red mic.